Well, we're back here at On Map, On Mission. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Scott Rogers, and once again, Darren Neely is with me at the table. We're doing a set of conversations focused on the topic of church hurt, and this is our second conversation. We're going to look at how to walk through it and how to find healing.
I've got something in my eye.
All right, Darren, here we go again.
We're doing it.
I mean, we didn't change clothes or anything. We just
been here
hit
all night.
stop, and I was going to say we pushed. Remember the cassette decks,
Man.
where when you recorded, you hit you pressed play and record at the same time.
Two at the same time. Yeah, man. I used to
Those
record.
things floating in the air.
I used to
here, too.
record the radio.
Oh yeah,
I'd wait on a song to come
creating
on.
mixtapes and stuff.
Man, those were
So now that
good
we've
days.
basically set ourselves in the context of senior citizens,
We are that old. We are that old.
somebody mailed me a DVD I got in the mail yesterday, a ministry that, hey, check out our stuff.
I'm
It's
going to go ahead and
DVD.
predict they're not going to make it.
Yeah, I filed it.
Yeah. Yeah, that ministry is not going to be around very long.
Man, we're talking about church hurt. Thank you so much for just sharing your thoughts in our last episode. And if those listening haven't listened to it or heard or watched it, go back and check that out. It really sets the table for what we're talking about. In the posture is, I'm not interviewing you.
We are not doing
We're
an
just kind of
interview.
doing it, to having a conversation together.
We're just talking.
We're just talking.
You're not better
That's
than
what we
me.
always tell ourselves, right?
I'm not better than you.
Just pretend like you're talking
we're
to
just
one another.
having a
No one's
conversation.
watching. No one's listening, which might be the case
It's
anyway.
usually the case, on my end.
But
for sure.
our goal in this conversation is to really talk about the reality of the need to confront our pain, to deal with it, to move forward, and to find healing. So let's just start with this. Darren, why is it necessary to deal with the hurt at some point? Like, can we avoid it forever, and what happens if we do?
Well, I can tell you exactly what happens because that's my story. My story is I just moved from one dysfunction to the next, right? I talked on the last episode about, coming out of a dysfunctional staff. Then I started working at another church, and then that ended very poorly. And then I brought that into our church plant.
Mm-hmm.
And then I brought that all the way to Houston, Texas. It came all the way with me.
It came all the way with you.
Yeah, I don't remember packing it.
No.
But boy, it was here when I got here. And I was great for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
It was new. It was exciting.
Like we can function with her.
Yeah.
Right?
I was doing the stuff, man. I was doing it. But the problem, here's the problem, is the moment it gets re-triggered.
Exactly. And it will.
And it will, and it did.
Mm-hmm.
Because we went through a big transition here several years ago.
Okay.
New pastor, Matt starts leading the church. So we went through this huge, I don't know how long it ended up being, this big transitional period. And during that period, a lot of my stuff got re-triggered. To the point to where I honestly, like my brain said, you've had enough. And I just shut off, man. A lot of people know my story after Harvey.
Harvey being the hurricane.
The hurricane, yeah, not a gentleman. But after that whole deal, all systems just shut off. And I stopped coming to work. I stopped caring. I would show up on a Sunday if I was scheduled to preach and give terrible messages that people were starting to notice, hey, what's going on with this guy? I stopped caring about being a good husband, about being a good dad. And
some of this you're saying came, some of that behavior was resulting from undealt hurt that was undealt.
All of it was, man. All of it was.
Really?
And it got me to a point to where I was just useless. I just felt useless. Like it just beat me down. And it was through being let go here that I finally had to start dealing with some of this stuff. And I wasn't necessarily eager to deal with it, as most of us aren't.
Right. Pick your pain, which path you want to go down,
yeah,
right?
and it was like, I can't go much further down this other path anymore.
So let me choose this painful path.
Yeah. And so for me personally, it took a lot of professional help, a lot of counseling, to figure out exactly all the things that led me to that point. And so much of it was church related.
Wow.
And then it also took, it took having a supportive spouse during that time that didn't bail on me. And then it also, part of that healing was the restoration of some of those relationships that had gone poorly through the years. And kind of owning my part in the dysfunction.
So let's talk about that for a moment. How important is relationships in the process of healing, the journey of healing, whatever words you want to use? Like, we realize that relationships are a great source of pain, but they're also a great source of healing. And when you talked about restoring some of those, that makes me scared to hear that. I'm like, well, that's not been part of my journey necessarily to restore those relationships. Even though I was kind of restored as my heart was restored, I wasn't in a situation where that was necessary. I don't think, at least not at this point. But how important were relationships to you in the process of healing, and maybe a story or two and some specifics of how that person helped you make progress, etc.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, because when I was out here at the Met, it was very embarrassing. Like, I felt like I had a scarlet letter on me every time I walked into church.
During this season, after this?
Yes, after. Because, Ashley's still on the stage, and we're still coming to church here, and I was just really embarrassed.
Takes a lot of courage.
Well, and there's weeks that I didn't have the courage to even show up. I'm not going to lie. I mean, there were lots of weeks that I just stayed at the house, man. But what was very advantageous for me is just to still have a few people that would say, hey, man, we still believe in you. Like, this thing may have come to an end, but we still believe in you. And the close relationships I had around me.
Well, let me ask. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep inserting. When you said this thing came to an end, from your perspective, was it at that point in time, was it a necessary ending?
Oh, 1,000%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're not feeling like I was the victim in this. And
I would have been foolish. It would have been foolish for anyone to have kept me around during that season.
Okay.
That would have been very poor leadership. Because it's the only thing that allowed me to begin to
face
heal.
The junk and So you got some people around you that still believed in
me, even people that were part of that process.
Yeah,
I wasn't just
amazing.
Thrown to the curb.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Right? So that was a huge part of my story. The other part, when it comes to relationships, and I did mention restoring some of the hurt. I told you on the last episode that 4 of our 5 families that helped us start that church left.
Yeah.
Well, one of those families was my own dadgum brother-in-law. It was Ashley's brother. He was my worship leader.
Wow.
And he sat down at a coffee shop and said, dude, I can't do this anymore. And honestly, I thought, yeah, I can't blame you. So the awkwardness in that relationship was, oh, guess what? You're still seeing these people all the time. And it took a while, however. Now, we did make a pact to never work with each other ever again. We did establish that rule.
Yeah.
Just for future. He'll never work at the Met if I'm at the Met. But we had to restore that. And then slowly, we just had some good conversations with most of these other families because we still cared about the relationship with the people.
Yeah.
I had smoked them pretty bad. But it seemed like it's what we needed to do. So the relational end of that was the critical factor, I think, in letting and allowing me to move forward.
Yeah.
And it definitely changed everything of almost any measurable on how important those relationships should be in your life, that it changed the way I looked at that. Because I'm an introvert, and most folks don't get that from me if they see me up on a stage. They're like, "There's no way you're an introvert," but it's off the stage. I'm like, I can duck and hide with the best of them. And so relationships are not just like this natural thing for me. Like, solid relationships require me to work way harder than I prefer to work. But it is that's what's gotten Ashley and I through this whole deal.
And it's probably a small circle of
very, very small,
very vulnerable, very honest.
Yeah. So if you come up to me, like, you know, you see you meet somebody or you follow somebody online and you think, oh man, we would be best friends. Like, if you come up to me and go, hey man, I think we should be best friends, we're probably not going to be.
Yeah.
I love you, but I bet we won't be best friends. Or maybe we will. I don't know. I just doubt
What's going on right now? I don't even know what he's saying.
So the relational end of it.
Yeah.
It's what the whole thing hinges on.
Okay, not to sound hyper spiritual, but that matters. Did God bring them to you? Or did you have to cultivate that? Or was it simply a grace gift of God saying, here's a few people that are going to love you well?
You know, I think that we had cultivated a few relationships already here that cared about us. And there was a large group of people that cared about us, but you know, to have a few people who would just kind of sit with it and be okay sitting in it with me, I think that was a God-given deal. I think, you know, to be willing to sit with people when their lives are falling apart. Most of us aren't signing up for that position,
but it's such an important facet of the healing process.
Yeah, it has to.
So, if you're watching or listening right now, and if you've been hurt, I would encourage you to pray, to look for, to cultivate, to lean into those few people that you can have a very caring, trusting, honest relationship with, that will allow you to sit in that nasty weather and process it and walk through it without trying to fix you and rescue you, because it's part of God's process. We've got to walk through those dark, stormy clouds when it comes to these kinds of things without running to the sunshine with a group of people who are going to be superficial and say all the cliche things, but just to sit there with you, love you enough to say some things when you ask for input, but to just, come on, man. It's
and
good.
you certainly can't do it in isolation either. And I think environment matters. You know, I think we are a pretty rare situation, because I've often heard you can't heal where you've been hurt. Like there is sometimes you have to be out of that situation to begin to heal.
Okay.
I think there's some truth to that. But I think our situation it was kind of the opposite of that. We somehow did end up healing in a place of hurt. Not that anybody did anything to us, but where we were hurting.
Like, you couldn't heal in an ongoing abusive relationship.
No, absolutely.
You got to get out. You got to go
out of that.
But that wasn't your situation here.
No, it wasn't our situation here. I could not have healed and stayed in Arkansas. I couldn't have just said, okay, well, we're going to retool everything and relaunch and there was no way in the world I was going to get healing in that situation.
So this is good for us to hear too, for those of us who want to be part of the healing for someone else, like to be these kind of people for others. Keep going, please.
So one of the things that helped me is I did have some people on the outside that weren't necessarily involved in any of these situations. Just friendships from college years, friendships from early in ministry, many of whom had gone through very similar situations. I mean, most of these guys I talked to were not even in ministry anymore. In fact, we kicked around an idea of even starting a podcast and calling it Beyond the Steeple for folks who used to be in full-time vocational ministry and that just aren't doing that anymore because it's so prevalent. And a lot of these guys have honestly still not necessarily dealt with what's actually happened. And so it's bonkers for me now to be back under the steeple. And I don't know what that's going to look like moving forward with me connecting with those guys.
I'm not saying thus saith the Lord, but I couldn't imagine God's going to let that experience not go to good use in the lives of other people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this for just a minute, Darren. It does actually sound like I'm interviewing you now. That's fine with me.
It's fine. I don't care. It's your show.
So we've talked about the necessity of healthy relationships that are part of the healing process. Let's talk about your relationship with Christ. Like, what did he do? What did you do in that relationship that contributed to the healing that you're now walking in?
Yeah, that was a strange one for me. Part of my brokenness in all of that is I had reached a point to where I began to believe that I was done, right? Like, I was called to ministry in college, but that ship has sailed now, and has something to do with me. Like, it's my dysfunction that has led all of this hurt.
You've sabotaged God's calling on your life, kind of a thing.
Yep. Even though, I never cheated on my wife. I hadn't.
It's not
not
immorality.
Doing the main
it's
things
not
that most guys get caught up in, right? That disqualifies them. But I just didn't feel valuable anymore. I didn't feel like I had any use. I felt like a failure, and therefore I believed that I was being punished for something. And so I began to view God as the punisher.
Wow.
And I sat in that for a long time, man. I'm talking about several years after I began to get counseling, after kind of start getting back up on my feet, I would still feel like that. I was doing these crazy jobs, just trying to pay bills, and every day I would get up and go to work and just feel like it was punishment. But Ashley, my wife Ashley, she continued to say this phrase to me over and over and over and over. She continued to say, maybe you're not being punished, maybe you're being pursued. And when are you going to hit pause on the punishment part and maybe just let him pursue you and see what happens there? And it was really hard for me to believe, even in the midst of what we've talked about, the relationships I had, people that were cheering for me, people that were for us, people that were for me. Even in the middle of all of that, there just still was something in my head that told me I was getting what I asked for. And it took a while, man. It took a while to begin to believe that I was being pursued and not punished. And that's a weird thing about being hurt, is your mind begins to convince you that somehow this is all you. You're the reason. Even in physical abuse or sexual abuse, the abused begin to somehow believe that this is, I guess I asked for this. And that's just a lie, man. And to be able to kind of wake up on a Monday and go, okay, today I'm gonna begin to choose to believe the right things. I'm gonna believe who I am. I'm gonna believe that adopted into God's family through Jesus. I'm gonna find some peace in that, and I'm choosing today to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that enough days in a row, and I'm starting to believe it again, right? And I believe that was, I talked the last time about how when I walked up the stairs that day to shoot that video, and I walked into the offices, it was like this moment I believe I had with God, to where He goes, "I told you, man. I told you I wasn't done. I told you this wasn't just something that's part of your past story. I called you to this kind of stuff, and this is what I want you doing." And then I guess another answer to the question, as far as kind of what the Jesus part of this is, I would have to say Ashley played a big part of that. She played a big part of just being the encourager and the cheerleader, and reminding me what God says, who God says I am, and what the Bible says about who I am. Mm-hmm. She was just a consistent voice of biblical and godly encouragement.
Yeah.
And that was such a big part of it.
Wow.
Such a big part of it.
Dang. I think about some of my journey with these kinds of things, and I was just thinking about this conversation, and there's a psalm that comes to mind for me. It's Psalm 139, and it's this psalm written by David. And let me just pull it up here. It's fascinating to me because he starts this psalm out with, I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but he says, "You've searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit down, you know when I rise up, you know my thoughts." He says things like, "Where can I go from your spirit? I can't. Wherever I go, you're there. Yeah. I can't. There's no running from you, God." And he's in a tough place. At least we think he is when he writes this. And he says, "You've created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and your works are wonderful." I know that. Those are beautiful truths that we tend to bring to very celebrative moments, right? And he says, "My frame wasn't hidden from you." He talks about you saw my unformed body, and all the days ordained for me, you had written in your book. How profound to me are your thoughts, O God. And he just goes on this worshipful declaration. And then you're talking about God's thoughts to him. He says, were I to count them, they'd outnumber the grains of the sand. When I awake, I'm still with you. Like, awesome. And then the very next verse, in verse 19, he says, "If only you, God, would slay the wicked." He says, "Away from me, you who are bloodthirsty." And he's just like laying it down, like, kill them all.
Yeah.
And then after he gets through that, he ends it by saying, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." And I look at that and I'm like, it's one of the most honest moments with God that's ever been written down.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like,
God, I praise you. I'm reminding myself of who you are and who I am in your eyes. And at the same time, I'm going to really tell you what I feel about so-and-so. And would you just kill him?
Right.
Just kill them all. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like he shifts. Says, "Yeah, but look at my heart too, God." And there's something about when we take these hurts in an honest fashion, like brutally honest to God. Like in my experience, I've said things to God in prayer that would be offensive for people to hear.
Yeah, 100%.
And even when I'm voicing it, I'm like, "Oh God, I'm saying this in reverence, but I'm just telling you because you already know, right?" And I've found that in those moments when hurts like these happen and these things are in me, in addition to the relationships of people who love me and surround me, it's that brutal honesty with God and reminding ourselves of who we are in his eyes, but also telling him how it hurt, who hurt me, what it was like, and just saying, and God just search my heart.
Yeah.
What's that, and I've found that to be crazy healing. Not like immediately, but over time.
No, I can just remember weeks of standing in the back of the church after I wasn't on staff anymore, and out loud saying, I don't believe any of the words on the screen right now.
Were they scriptures or something like that?
Just songs.
Songs, yeah, worship songs.
Just songs.
Yeah.
I'm not experiencing any of this peace that we're singing about. I don't have any of this hope that we're singing about. And that was my main emotion. My main emotion during that season was real hopelessness. And I would just...
And that's a key emotion. I'd say key. I don't know the right word. In depression, hopelessness is one of the strongest emotions, right?
That was definitely strongest with me. But I would just say it out loud. And I would say it out loud because I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't going to stand there and fake it. In fact, I was usually as far back in the back of the room as I could get. And I kept as little as there for a season that I was pursuing God, and I felt like He was punishing me. When I did, hit my knees, when I did kind of feel like, hey, it's been a minute since we've talked, I was always very honest and very desperate. But then one of the things that I think was holding my healing back was I was not willing to necessarily own up my part of it for a while. I wasn't. It felt more comforting to me just to be a victim, and to feel sorry for myself.
In which there are instances where people are 100% the victim.
Truly,
right?
victims.
Abusive situations.
Yep.
I know you're not talking about that.
No.
But in your situation, you contributed a little bit to it.
I was part of it.
Yeah.
I had always been part of it. And in almost every one of the situations, I was part of it. So when I started owning that stuff and taking a real hard look at me, I started making some progress when I was willing to do that.
Yeah.
It's easy, man. It's easy to sit in the victimhood. It's comfortable because I've got no responsibility.
Right.
I've just been wronged, and hopefully somebody will come around and make it all right. But I had to do some work, man.
Yeah.
I had to do some work to move out of that hopelessness.
Sure.
And to begin to wake up in the mornings and go, oh, it's going to probably be a pretty good day today.
Yeah.
I may do something that matters today.
Yeah.
This
is 3 big things that, goodness, for those listening, like, we don't just do these once, check off the box, and there we go. Step 1, ding, 2, ding, 3, there we are. These are constant things, and they could be for months, maybe a couple of years. Maybe it is quick. It's a 2-day deal, but there's that getting real in our relationship with Christ in a sense of vulnerable, honest, but also that same with a small circle of friends who will give us the space, the safe place to process. And then, like in your story, if there's a part that's mine that I've contributed to this, I got to own it.
Yeah.
And I got to call it what it is, and that's no fun. And I just got to get real with it, and for me, even repent of it.
Yep.
And
I would even say, Scott, that part of that last part, and I mentioned this when I preached a couple of weeks ago, part of that last part of owning it and dealing with the hard, for a lot of people, is going to mean actually getting some sort of professional help. I still see a counselor every 2 weeks, right? Because it's not a one and done deal. It's not a headache. You know what I mean? It's a heart thing, and it's a brain thing, And there's stuff that we have convinced ourselves of in our brains that takes some work to get out of there. So I would encourage people that are dealing with, maybe currently dealing with church hurt, or maybe somebody sent you this because they knew that's your thing. It may take some real help. And I will say that it's by far worth the money, and it's worth the time, and it's worth the things you have to wrestle through to get on the other side of some of this stuff. Because that's, for me, that's where the hope started to come back in. I'll tell you a quick story. I've been seeing this counselor up in the Woodlands for quite a while. And we had worked through some hard stuff, man. I mean, some very difficult stuff for months and months and months and months. And I walked in one day, and I sat down in the seat that I normally sit down in. This guy's got this big, nice, fancy office. And I looked up, and I said, "Hey, man, when'd you put that guitar on the wall?" And he just looked at me and goes, "It's been there the whole time." I said, "No, it hasn't." I said, "My wife plays the guitar. I would have recognized that guitar in that glass case. There's no
In the glass case.
In a glass case. I mean, prominently displayed right by where I sit every single time." He goes, "No, it's been up there the whole time." I said, "No, it hasn't, Steve." I said, what are we doing here, man?" He said, "You're seeing things again."
Wow.
I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Man, when you first came in here, you couldn't see anything but yourself."
Oh my God.
And I was like, "Okay."
Wow.
He said, "You're the third patient I've worked with recently that it's taken months for them to see something in my office."
Really?
He said, "And two people, specifically the guitar." And he said, "That lets me know that your eyes are back up again, and you're looking at things, and you're seeing things." And it was probably that was one of the first moments that I really had some hope again.
Wow.
All of those years of the church hurt.
Wow.
I had
So this isn't metaphorical, blah, blah, blah. This is real, physical.
Yeah. It was affecting that much of me.
Did you, okay, like quick question, we'll wrap it up. Because what we're going to do in the next conversation in this, we're going to talk about forgiving and trusting again. Like, how do what does it look like to trust the church again?
Yeah.
That's a scary thought for some people that have been hurt. And we'll just kind of try to unpack some of that. But when he said you're seeing things again, what'd that mean to you? Like, was he right? And what's your experience with that?
Yeah, I remember walking out of the office that day, and like even breathing the air felt different. It felt lighter.
So it hadn't been you were seeing things different again for a month. It was like that day it happened, or really close to that time.
Yeah,
something
it was
breakthrough.
There was a breakthrough somewhere.
Yeah.
And it did. It allowed me to believe that I can recover from this. This doesn't have to define me anymore. I'm not just staring at my own hurt all day long anymore. I'm seeing things around me. I can experience things again. I can. Maybe God is not done with me yet, and that was a big one for me. Like maybe He's not finished with me yet. The significance of feeling like that I was getting better was enormous, because I was at a point to where I just thought I'm just going to be this broken soul forever. And for Him to acknowledge that in a very real way was a big turning point for me. Yep.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah,
I hope that gives some encouragement to folks out there to know that whatever they're walking through, there is another side of this.
Yep.
There is the other side of this that 100%. They can come through.
100%.
Appreciate you, Darren. We're going to keep these conversations going. And for guys, all of you listening and watching, Man, we love you and hope that this has been really helpful to every one of you. Please share it with someone you know who may have experienced some of these things, and we hope that it brings some encouragement into their lives as well. We'll see you guys soon.